Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm Hisham, and this is,
Quantumly Leaping Podcast.
yes. Uh, Today we're going to talk about a topic that is really, really important, and I don't think we're talking about it enough. We're going to talk about mental health. And, to me, I think that mental health is a pandemic, but because it's invisible and because it's not caused by a virus or anything, you know, it's kind of like still not visible and still not enough talking about it. And we're going to talk about that by by the because of the story that everybody heard here in Canada, in Nova Scotia. 22 lives were lost, 23 including the shooter himself. And most likely, I mean, like, this investigation are still, we're not kind of speculating, but most likely it's because he has mental issues and all. And regardless of that, we for the past couple of years we have faced here in Canada a lot of mass killings or mass shootings because of people with mental health. So I believe it's I'm not gonna say it's time to talk about it because people are talking, and but I think that it's, no matter how much we talk about it, it's not enough. So we wanted just to put that. But before we start, I wanted to pay a tribute and respect for all the innocent lives who were lost in Nova Scotia, and for the people who are left to mourn. Yesterday there was a vigil. Many Canadians around the country and even people around the world has joined that virtual vigil, and I think this is it was kind of emotional, and but I think it's one of the best thing that shows that the nation and the world is standing up for this and standing against both both the issues with mental health and gun violence, which is we're gonna leave maybe for a separate episode. So, Jim, I'll also let you, uh, because I've paid my tribute. I know that you have some words for the victims, so please.
Yeah, I'd like to ex- basically concur with what you said. It was uh, um, it was a very tough situation to hear happening again. Doesn't matter where this happens, but when it happens in Canada, it makes it even harder, closer to the heart. That's why I'm wearing red today. We were
Mhm.
asked to wear red on Friday, but that's why I'm wearing red today to remember the victims. And we, you know, this is something that has not just affected us Canadians because of this, but we're going to discuss this, how it's affected us in our community as well. But yes, it's very tough to talk about, so I figured I'll wear red today, and for that
Yeah,
reason.
I solidarity. I wore red yesterday on the vigil. Today I'm wearing black to also to show
Yeah,
solidarity on mourning
yeah.
for those victims. And so I just want to let our audience know that today is a little bit different format. We're gonna just split it into two major topics, for that matter. Usually we talk about four topics, 10 minutes, but today we're gonna take about two because we want to concentrate on these two topics within our 40 minutes format. So uh, let's start with the fact that so this happened right now during this pandemic. And I'm not going to say, because I'm not going to say that the pandemic is the cause of that, because it's obviously that he planned this for a long time and he was waiting. But I think this whole pandemic has also given a chance for him to do that, because a lot of people are staying at home. There are barely anything going on, so it helped him to do that. And I also think that pandemics like this, because we touched base on that in the episodes before, that people with anxiety or mental problems under this quarantine are also facing even bigger issues. And I'm not defending, of course, the shooter, but I know people with anxiety here, very peaceful people, and they're facing even much harder time. into this pandemic and staying at home and being like, it's to them, to people's anxiety, it looks like a small prison. This is what one of my friends actually expressed it that way. And I really think that we should do better. I mean, like, let's talk, let's concentrate now on our first on what can be done from a healthcare point of view, whether it's on the federal level or the provincial level.
Yeah, so basically, in this situation, yes, it looks like he did have mental issues, but also another thing that this gentleman did, which was very, very tough, was he dressed like an officer, and he had a car. So that also didn't assist in the optics of the situation. And looks like he had some sort of list and all that, like we've wrote a lot over the past week or so. And so well, then the rampage he went on was almost not a short area. It was almost 100 kilometers over 2 days. And there's a lot of questions being asked about this, but at the end of the day, we're not. We're mentioning some other terms, but I think the most important thing is that yes, there was 22 victims. That's the most problem with this, but also that it happened during a time where people were home and so forth. But part of the reason Hisham and I talked about this here the last 3-4 days was that there is an issue, especially where I live. I see it. This is all over Canada, but I live near the downtown core, so I see it in my neighborhood, and maybe full time I'll discuss situations that happened to me over the past few months. But I think that all governments have to pay attention to this more often, and perhaps what will happen now post-COVID is that certain things that have been ignored or not really focused on by governments and by our society and our communities, because we are responsible too. We have some responsibility as well, that this will shine some light. And again, this is a very topic, and I was looking forward to sharing, because I think that by the time you end the show, you'll understand some of the personal stories that's happened to us. We'll discuss in a few minutes.
Yeah, and in the second part, as we said, we're going to talk about community's role. But now here's the thing, because you mentioned also in your neighborhood, and I've been there many times, walking back here, and see all of these homeless people that people are ignoring. And there are a lot of studies that show that most of them they're homeless because they have mental problems. It's not because they like being homeless. No one likes to be homeless. A lot of people has some real issues, financial issues and all, but many of them, the people who are not having mental issues and they get homeless, they get it for a while in their time, and then sometimes they get up or they get on their feet. But mostly those permanent people with permanent homelessness are people who have mental issues. And I've heard that an unofficial study, because it's very tough to do a study on homeless, which is also, I think, something that the cities or the provinces has to do. That they have to go far to make these kinds of studies. But 20% of the homeless people, at least in the GTA area, are having severe types of autism. I don't know. I mean, autism is a big spectrum, but when you have severe autism, those people cannot take your, even if they have home, they cannot go back home, even if you live them like a block away. So they're homeless, not because they want to be homeless, because they don't know how to get home, even if they have one. And you see, okay, the cities are doing what they can, or what they say they can for the time being, giving them shelters and all. But a shelter is not going to solve. They're going to solve them where they stay at night when it's very cold, or when there's a dangers or whatever. It's not going to solve their mental health. Actually, there are studies shows that in those shelters there are sometimes violence, there are sometimes, and it actually might increase the mental issues for those people. And like as you said, in your neighborhood, I've seen a lot of those, and I was looking and say like, you remember, in many cases that we saw in around your neighborhood, and even here in Mississauga, or in any other city in Canada, we're seeing this, and I'm not sure. Like, should we do something in our healthcare because we don't have any clear thing right now in our healthcare system to support mental problems?
No, we don't. Here in Canada, we have a one day in January at the end where we raise money for mental health, and it's great. A lot of money gets raised, but here's the thing: one day doesn't solve this.
Yeah.
I tell people this, and I don't like to be a Debbie Downer, but every day is a mental health day, every day. And so, yes, one day everybody hashtags and they raise money and donate, but that's not enough. And I'm not picking my neighborhood just to showcase it. I'm not. I'm just saying that I've seen it. I've seen how it's getting worse um, uh, in my neighborhood, and it's a small sample, but I see it even downtown. I was going to an event in September of last year, and I was in Yonge and Dundas area, and a lot of things were going on, and I was like, what is going on inside the 7-Eleven? There was people, running around screaming at 7-Eleven, and people were in line, trying to pay for something, and then there's guys just creating scenes inside the 7-Eleven. I was like, how do these employees, do this? How do they handle this? They think the police are not going to come and help. So, for me, as just as a citizen, community member, it was very disturbing to see how it's gotten worse. And I think that there's more that needs to be done, but I don't see it happening fast. And so this situation here we've gone through is showcased, exasperated this, and something has to be done. And a lot of things have come, not just this, a lot of things have come to light because of COVID-19. So we have to do better. And the part of doing this show today with Hisham is to speak as leaders and as influencers that this has to change. And again, we'll share some of our stories here later in the show. But on a top level, the federal government, provincial communities have to do more. I mean, when it's cold here, they pass, when it's like -10, -20, and homeless people are dying, and those stats are not even accurate. How many are dying? They were keeping stats. I don't know what they are, but there's obviously people not surviving winters here in Toronto, and they tend to be pretty bad. They've opened up warming centers, and I've seen these warming centers. I passed by a few of them. Let me tell you, they weren't very pretty at all. So again, we have a problem, and I think that it's not just picking on politicians. It's the community at large that's responsible, and we have to do more. We don't have all the solutions, ladies and gentlemen. We're not doing the show to say the solutions, but we have to talk about it, and that's why we're doing the show today. We kind of went off base of what the topics we're going to share about, but we felt that this is important to talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, like, of course, we're not picking on anyone. It's the role of everybody. But but the thing is, as we talked about, we see exemplary countries in the world, and we're not trying to compare here. The point here is to show that other countries have bigger issues. Like I have friends from Norway, where they barely see the sun the whole year. It's a very and I've seen one of my friends who's Italian went to Norway many times, and he say it is so depressive there. I say, like, why? Is he like, there's no sun. It's always cloudy and all of these things. And of course, Italy is blue skies and all of these things. So when he went there, he was shocked. But when I looked at my friends from Norway and the government, because they know that this is how the country and how this, they have a very strong and powerful mental health kind of a program within their healthcare, for that matter. Now, I know that it might be too much to do it here in Canada, but we could see. I mean, we could do something for us to tailor it to us, because we see that other countries are doing it. And there is also, we're talking about homelessness. I've heard about a Canadian city here in Canada, in the west coast, who has ended homelessness. They ended homelessness. They have followed a great plan about, and what I've heard from that is that, because here, for example, in Toronto, let's say, or in the GTA area, if you want to come to a homeless shelter, they say you shouldn't be alcoholic, you shouldn't be an addict, or something like that. Like, we know that these people have mental problems, and this is why, one part of it. And so you tell them not to come into the shelters until they get what that city done. I forgot their name. It's a very small city in the West Coast, but they've done is like they welcomed everyone, and they started getting to know those homeless people inside the shelters and see their problems and solve their problems from the mental health issue that they utilize. Most of them now, they say, are out of the shelters because they realize their problems. They cured their addictions. They put them in a job market. A lot of them, even some of them, have some records because of they even worked with the police on expunging their records for them, a small incidents and all. Like, this is a great thing, and this happens here in Canada, not anywhere in the world. It happened here, so we know that we can do something about it. Like the incident, I'm sure that you referred to some incident that we saw together in your neighborhood, and I think, like, you remember, I saw that these people. You remember when I told you that when we see one of those incidents, but this is solvable, right? Remember that?
Are you talking about the old man?
Yes, but I don't want to say names or situations,
Okay.
because the thing is, we talked about the same thing, and I told you it's solvable, and I think I touched down on that city. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember. Yes.
Yeah, and as you said, it's a solvable. So like you talked about, can you just tell me a little bit, because I'm sure that you poked the audience interest when you talked about those houses, and it's not pretty. So can you tell them about it? Because I want them to know that uh, the solution that we think work, they don't work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
and as an insider point, I would like to tell you to tell them about it.
Yeah. So, you talking about the respite centers? Is that what you're
Yes.
talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I do a lot of cycling here in Toronto throughout the year. So I've passed by some of these respite centers, and one day, a friend of mine who works one of them invited me in, and usually it doesn't happen. So he got clearance, and I walked in, and it was kind of interesting to see how organized it was and clean it was. And I was a little shocked, actually, to see the respite centers, how they were, but there's a lot of stringent guidelines that have to happen. But the other thing that was the disappointing part was the warming centers. So in the wintertime, the warming centers open up here throughout the city. So there's one at Metro Hall. And again, I was cycling one day, and sort of they use a portion of the main floor. And I do events there, so I'm very aware of the thing. But the way they had set it up was almost like haphazardly. There was security there. It was very dark, and it was sort of ad hoc. So because I'd been to a respite center, and I was like, well, why is this so bad? This area here.
Yeah.
And they're telling me because it wasn't, it was a temporary solution. But I think they could have did a little better job to keep it a little more cleaner and more things. So I'd seen both areas, but the respite centers are, again, a short-term solution, but not a long-term solution.
Yeah, and even
to that.
Yeah, and even in this the shelters, the homeless shelters, they say that they're so much cramped, and
Yes.
they're those beds are over, and there are a lot of fights sometimes happening because
Yes. Yeah,
and
I have a gentleman in my neighborhood here. He spent some time in there. Didn't spend a lot of time in there because he got his feet going. But he said it's no fun in there. Some of them are scared because their stuff gets stolen. There's fights. There's a whole other challenge in being in those areas. Not all of them, but again, they don't feel safe. At the end of the day, they don't feel safe for themselves or around them. So even though the city pushes those, they're not that. They don't feel safe in there either.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah. No, I was just saying because you talk about safety. Sorry for the interruption, because you reminded me of a very serious topic as well. The homeless mothers and their kids. I mean, sometimes you can compromise your own safety, but when you have a kid there with you, and I've heard some stories about mothers who prefer to leave the homeless shelters because they felt that their children are not safe. They were safer, and this is the I don't know, the irony of it. They felt safer out in the streets more than being in the shelters for their kids. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, like, right?
Like I said, well, I agree, and I think this is where probably it all falls down to, are we doing enough at the end of the day? So, I'm not saying that I have all the information, ladies and gentlemen, but from some of the information that I've heard is enough to gather that we're not doing enough.
Yeah.
And this COVID-19 has exacerbated the situation more. There's a lot more out there. I've seen them twice as more in my neighborhood, and I have a long walk and long bike ride I go to. It's tough to see. And, I've been in this neighborhood almost 49 years. So I can tell you 10 years ago, we didn't see this much, or 15. It is, very recent. So I guess it's a small sample, but that's enough to know that if it's here, and then I live on near Main Street called Yonge Street, and also on a major intersection, Yonge and Dundas, it's a big enough area to draw your conclusions. Yeah. So it's tough, and like I said, I can share some mini stories here later on, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
And to your point of it getting worse, because I'm comparing it to 2005 since I came in, and it is way worse. And I think, the stress that's coming up all over all people nowadays, like the job market stress. People are losing jobs, and the stress of all of the changes that's happening, economical changes, social changes, which is part of why we created this podcast. Actually, is the quantumly leaping changes that happen in the world that creates a lot of stress on people, and some people cannot just handle it. There are some people who can handle it, but a lot of people cannot, and that creates a lot of stress on them and creates mental problems, which causes homelessness, or which causes a lot of other things. And it just came to me like we should maybe do a one separate episode about homelessness and the collapse of some financial organizations, or even in the whole financial system that causes this thing. But let's leave that to a different thing. But our point here is, because we see more of this mental issue with the homeless people. This is why we were talking about it, and I think we both agree that governments can do better, cities can do better, but talking about this, I think we should now, because I don't want people now to think that, oh yeah, then we blame it on the government and we have it, but societies have to do a role. There is a study shows that at any given time, 1 of 5 Canadians have a mental issue, whether it's a temporary mental issue or a permanent mental issue. No, that's like 20%. And this is what we know of, because a lot of people have things that we don't have, mental issues that are invisible. Some of them don't want to talk about them, so we don't know. So 20% at least of the whole population have mental problems. There is no government in the world that can just take care of all of that by itself. And the problem with mental problem is, like, it's not a visible disease. It's not something that you can give a prescription like, okay,
Yeah.
so here's some antibiotics, you just take them for a week and then you're good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a society, because when somebody has a problem, a mental problem, it's not caused by a virus. It's caused by the social or the
Yeah.
structure around them, and people have to rally around that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from the
Yeah.
experiences that we saw, I
Yeah.
think we could tell a lot of this. I mean, and we have a lot to share, personal stories, right?
Yeah, and I'll share a quick story. I mean, when I started, and I worked for logistics company in 2003, and I had worked in retail for 10 years prior to that. When I started this job, it was very busy. A lot of people running around and all this. And I'll tell you, the first year was one of the hardest things of my life. People were yelling at me, do this, hurry up, and it jarred me. It jarred me. It was, I'd come home and I'd be like, what, what's going on? And the positive story is this: I'd met some mentors during that time, two of them, and I went into reading and listening and all that, and went into uh, bettering my mental toughness. And what I can tell you is I turned into a tiger, and with then things quickly changed for me, because then I didn't allow them to not beat me down, but mentally break me down, and I started to. I'm trying to be careful with the words. I wasn't fighting it; I was dealing with it, and many people noticed it. We're like, "Whoa, look at Jim!" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a Jim 2.0 here," because you had to. And there's many people who quit, who couldn't handle that pressure. And my mentor used to say, a spine is a terrible thing to waste. And what that means is that I've worked on my mental toughness, and it's something I've done. And fast forward to 2020, I've shared with Hashem, and I may share some stories here later on, how if I wasn't as mental tough as I am, I would not have made it through some situations that happened to me over the past few years. And I've shared some with them privately. They weren't bad. They weren't really bad situations, but I had to be mentally strong, and I am. And this situation here, test this COVID-19. The stress is real. I've spoken to a lot of people in my community. Some of them are just going through post-depression because of a family member passing away. Some are, not out there anymore, speaking or training or out there in the community. And they're not homebodies. They're not really homebodies. They thought they were, but they're not. They want to go out there. So I've heard it from other people, and this is a wide age too, from 20s all the way to 70s. I've heard it across a big age range. So it's real. And I think that, I took ownership of it. And my goal is this situation will bring to light and how this will be tough for many people, not just in our community, but around the world. But we have to take ownership on it personally. But I think we're not labeling anybody. And I'll mention that again. We're not labeling it's the federal government's fault, the provincial, it's community. It is all our responsibility. It is all our responsibility. And I want to make sure that we're crystal clear. We're not doing quantity leaping to complain. No, we're not. And if you think that, you're wrong. We're not doing that. We want to bring it to light, and we need to talk about it. And this is the platform where we can talk about it.
Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned that also about how this pandemic is making it worse, because here's one thing that I say, like, a couple of 2 weeks ago, I believe, when I shared with you that I've heard that 28% of small businesses in Canada have closed permanently because of this. And many of them are businesses that started just recently, and they expected that to show up, but then just now the government is offering help, for that matter. So what is happening is, okay, so they heard about this happening. At least we can offer you help with rent or anything like that. But we still hear about these business owners that many of them are thinking about suicide, because it's not just about the money that I could get. It's about these people have put, many of them have put their whole life saving, their whole life efforts to start those businesses, and now they're seeing them because of a pandemic that nobody saw happening this fast or this big, or at least people have ignored that. To be honest, some people saw it, some people didn't, but there was a wide ignorance about what's going on. But in any case, whatever the cause was, they're seeing the work of their whole life crumbling down, and they're thinking about suicide. Now, talking about the government, they're trying to do their job right now by trying to compensate them. But it's not an easy. When someone thinking about suicide, it's not about giving them money and say like, yeah, everything is going to be, I don't know, dandy or sunshines and rainbows. The people around the societies will have to try to stand up for them. Like if you know someone like that, you should stand up with them. You should push them. You should try to support them while they're passing through this, because it's not easy. And I've been there creating a business. It's not easy. It's blood, sweat, and tears. And when you find that for no logical reason, your whole life work is crumbling down in front of your eyes, it is not easy to take.
And I'll add a quick story. About 7 years ago, I started a speakers association, and it was from an organization in the United States, and I had brought the second organization to Toronto. One had already started in Calgary. And ladies and gentlemen, nobody showed up to my event that I was doing for 9 months. 9 months. And my friends in my community said, so are you going to wrap it up? Or are you going to quit? No. Really? No. And because I was so focused, I was so determined that I knew that this platform would have the resources and the community for up and coming speakers. Well, let me tell you, the 10th month, bang, bang, it flipped over, and I had chapters, 3-4 chapters running on a monthly basis all over Toronto. Now, the moral of the story is those same friends were like, "Oh, you did it." I'm like, "Of course I did. Why, you think I was going to do it?" Right? Because they told me privately that they could never do that. And these were pretty strong people. And I was like, why? Well, I don't have the determination resistance for failure, because it was utter failure in the beginning. But at the end of the day, I pushed through. And that was a huge lesson for me, because I've done other business ventures. When I started with Hisham 4 years ago, I brought Hisham one of the worst clients ever. It was not a good way to start a business venture. And I was like apologetic to Hisham for almost 5 months after even the situation occurred, because it wasn't a great way to showcase my abilities, right? But since then, fast forward, media company, podcast, and a lot of great things we've done together. So that's not easy. That's not easy, ladies and gentlemen, but you got to push through. And I think that the goal with this podcast is to talk about it, to try, even if we have, say I only have 7,000 people in my community, right? Well, I have responsibility for me, for those 7,000 people, through my blog, through my newsletter, through these channels. This is the way we can make a difference, and this is why we're doing this. So I'll throw it back to you, Hisham.
Yeah, and but so as you said, some people can take it, but a lot of people cannot take it by themselves. And we talked about business, but some of the other things are emotional kind of problems. Like a friend of mine in 1997 committed suicide. The story was because he couldn't marry the girl he loves because of religious things. But I was close to the guy, and this is the story that people talk. But the thing is, he was having a lot of mental issues because of his family, his parents. He couldn't communicate with them. They were not. So it is. I mean, there is always a direct reason for suicide, and sometimes it's just purely emotional. This is what people see, but there are something behind it. The thing about the whole thing is that his father didn't want him to marry this girl because they have different religions, but that is not. hurt him. He never have any communication with his father, and his mother was a nice lady, but she was so weak or something like that. I don't want to talk about it, but this is one of the things that is that. See, this is the thing. Is like he didn't have the support that he should have from the closest people. I mean, like as friends, we could talk to him and all of this thing, but he didn't talk about it. And at that time, I'm talking 1997, mental problems were a taboo to talk about. And, you're crazy. If you have a mental problem, you will be having that. And this is very, very dangerous because also 2 years ago, and like, the incident that this guy came in Toronto and killed 10 people with a truck. He also killed one of my friend's father, who actually doesn't even live in Canada. He was just here he lives in Jordan, about 70 years old. He lived in a very dangerous part of the world, but he was not having a scratch, but he comes to Canada, the safe country, and he was killed because someone had mental problems. And a lot of times, like, before they disable his LinkedIn account and his Facebook account, I just have a look at him, and like, it's obvious from his post that this guy was having problems, mental problems, and they couldn't handle that. And his parents would say, like, we couldn't do anything. We knew that he has problems. We were telling people, but we didn't. The shooter you remember that shooter where in Toronto, remember that?
Yeah, on the Danforth.
Danforth. Yeah, the Danforth area. It was also a tragedy. He was also mentally problem, and like,
Yeah.
you've got her because it's. I know that this is the Greek town. Remember?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was Greek town people out there enjoying their evening, and this guy gets a gun and shoots 10 people. And just to share a couple of stories on my end, I had a gentleman, we'll call him D.A. He was a friend that I've known for many years. We didn't hang around that often, but we crossed paths at events, and we used to go to some of the meetup groups together. Well, in December 31st, 2017, he committed suicide. And that night was one of the hardest, most unfun New Year's Eve I've ever lived. I had run into him about 4 months prior in September down at TIFF, and we took a picture together. He was an author. I had been to many events, and I couldn't tell you that week. I was not functioning that week. I mean, I was functioning, but my mind was thinking about him. And then last year, I lost a gentleman who I didn't know that long. I met him in the movie industry. I have been in the movie industry for 5 years. I met him on a set. His name J.S. we'll call him, and he referred me to an agent who ended up doing a lot of work with. He was 24 years old, and he committed suicide in April. And we had just done a film together, one film together, but different roles. And again, 24 years old. Again, another 3-4 days of just, I couldn't. I mean, I had pictures of him, and people were sharing montages on Facebook. It really, really brought it home to me, because this guy had a great heart. He had a career ahead of him, but he was tough on himself, and he couldn't get a break in the movie industry. And his sister found him, committed suicide. So when it hurts even more when someone close to you, it happens to someone close to you, and I've lost some other friends, not to suicide, but to mental health and other vulnerable issues here the last couple of years, and that's hard. And I was making a list of them here today just to remember them. So it hurts even more when it's people from your community.
Yeah, it's ironic that also my friend who committed suicide in 1997 committed suicide on the New Year's Eve as well. I know it's like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but I want to touch down on something important, because that time I was in Jordan. I was in a university in Jordan there, and because Our department. I was in the fine arts department, and it's a small department. Like we were not too much, and I remember the professors. They brought us because they knew that we were his close friends, and they brought us into a meeting after that, the day after that, and they told us like, you know what, if you want to skip a day or two, because it's hard to come and be there, and because we were here there with them like every day. So if you want to skip one day or two, we would understand. Don't worry, we're not gonna list you on the absentees or anything like that. I mean, like that was like 1997. People were more understanding than nowadays. I mean, I see communities are becoming farther away from each other or from far from understanding each other. I mean, like when something like this happen, it's not just the family of the victim that feels that; it's the people who are around him. Like because we were two close friends, and they told us like we knew that you have that, and it's maybe very tough to you to come here at the college, feeling that also. So you can skip a day or two. We didn't. We haven't. We decided to come. We didn't want to take day or two. Instead, we have started like a small vigil in college to remember him. But I don't see this feeling nowadays, the community feeling. And I think you have a story to share about something that happened to you, and you were working in some place and something happened, and I'll leave you to tell the story. And
Yeah, it's gonna be a short story. I was doing a special project outdoors in the Young and College area. It's about a couple of months ago, and we're handing out these magazines, fantastic magazines, by the way. And at one point, I was handing out the magazine, and a gentleman comes by with a big canister of gas. And the reason I knew it was gas is I smelled it. And he proceeds to dump it on the sidewalk. And people just kept on walking back and forth. I'm like, what's going on? So I could smell the gas. It was very heavy gas. So he leaves, and dark man, dark skinned man, and he comes back about 5 minutes later with a match, and he attempts to light the gas on the canister, and he was unsuccessful. And then people just kept on walking, and I'm starting to cough a little bit, and I'm handing out the magazines. Well, then he comes back again in 5 minutes with a lighter, and he attempts to light again. Well, I made a decision, and I yelled fire. So this is on a sidewalk. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I lifted up my arm and I said, fire, right? People reacted to me, but not like, scattering. So eventually people scattered, and I yelled fire, and the guy got scared. He dropped the lighter, and he took off into the subway system. One of the women I was working with, she calls 311, gets patched into the fire department. The fire department comes in. They showed up. They threw some stuff on the ground. They stayed. The police officers show up about 20 minutes after. They interviewed us, saying what happened. They said to me, where did he get the canister from? I go, I don't know. That's for you to figure out. And then they curtailed them. Maybe it was from a construction site in the neighborhood. And asked a few questions. And apparently he was known to them, this guy. They went down to the subway system, came back up, and obviously he was gone. So they left. So we phoned our manager, and we said, listen, this has happened. We're having a sore throat. Can you excuse us to go home? And they actually said, no. Said, we need you to go work at another location down the street. And me and the other two girls looked at each other and goes, is she serious? Like, we went through for me, it was a traumatic experience. And because the gas and everything. And let me tell you, I don't get frightened that easily. I'm a tough person. But it left such an impression on me as to how it went from bad to worse to ugly in less than 15 minutes in an area that I considered pretty safe. But obviously now it's not. There was a big hockey arena there years ago. So we went to the corner and we worked there for about half an hour. And I told her, we are going home. And we were like, they didn't respect our traumatic experience that we went through and told us to keep on working. We thought that was very insensitive. And I proceeded to tell them this for a number of weeks after that. And I was worried that might not, keep me, but they did. But I said, you have to be a little more respectful, that if something as that traumatic happens, you have to represent our wishes that, we're not working there. And it was tough. It was a tough thing to see. And this showcased a lot of things. People are doing even bad things now. Like,
Yeah.
who knows if he would, like, a whole bunch of things could have happened. He could have lit it, the flyer, because the gas was all over the sidewalk. It could have lit our magazines on fire. It could have caught someone else could have got on fire.
A lot of damage.
A lot of damage could have happened. It could have been worse. That's why when the fire department came and just threw some stuff on the ground, and then they were off, back to the fire station, and it left a very jarring event for me. Yeah. So I tell you, this is real. I know this is a small situation, but it happens. It happens. Yeah. Hashem and I had a situation where we supported to save a life of a gentleman who had fallen down. A seizure. He had a seizure, and we stepped in. Luckily, there was a nurse there, an off-duty nurse. She stepped in. The ambulance came and helped out. So we, as a community, do have a moral authority to not just watch, but to be part of the solution in some way. So thank you for sharing. But I just want to be honest that this has hit both of us in very serious ways, and we have to share. I hope I wasn't too detailed with it, but it happens.
No, I know. And the story that you mentioned about this guy who has a seizure, and I know we were lucky, and there's a lot of people came in to help. But I want to stress on something, because this was like a physical kind of thing. He had a seizure. He was bleeding. He went but in a different event where I was in the streets, in one of the Toronto streets that day, and there was this guy. He's a big guy who was actually abusing. It sounds like his sister or someone from his family, and she's a grown-up girl, but it's obviously she has mental problems, because she has a grown-up body, but she sounded like a 7-year-old girl. So I would say that she has mental, and he was abusing her and in shouting. And I was stood up to look, and I was this close to call 911, and he looked at me. He's a big guy. I was like, "What are you looking at?" I was like, this is the government property. I could look whatever I want. But he could have done something bad to me, but it's not. I wasn't afraid or annoyed by him more than I was annoyed by other people who were passing, seeing everything that's going on, whether him abusing her or me trying to stand up for him, and he's like threatening me in an indirect way, and nobody just took anything. I mean, like, it was really annoying to me to see that. Okay, why do we help people when they have a physical problem, when we see blood or when we see people bleeding, but when we see them bleeding emotions, let's say, or having problems, why don't we just go and help them? This is I think, because I don't want to take this way too much. I know that we get even over time, but the thing is, this is what I think is missing here. It's like our role as a community, as one body, and I'm not talking about just Canadian community. I'm talking about a global community. We're bringing these examples because we are Canadians, we live here, but I'm sure stories like that are spread all over the world, and we need to do something. We communities are, I would say, at least 75%, responsible for that, because the government can do something, but they can do so much. It's not something that you can, I don't know, cure with a few tablets or antibiotics. It is a responsibility, and it's a human problem. Only human-to-human communication should solve that. So I think our message, I believe, or I hope that we we delivered our message here, and I hope we would talk about these kind of problems more and more, not just here, but for everybody who's listening to us, for everybody who cares about this, to talk about it more and more. It's going to affect us. It's going to affect us. I had some anxiety problems before in one in my life. I'm sure everybody does. Uh, it's something that affects us all.
Yeah.
We should need to talk about it, and we should break that taboo that if you have a mental problem, then that means you're crazy or you're unfit for work or something. That is all not true. We need to break that wall, and we need to talk about it. And I'll leave the last word for you, Jim.
Yeah, well, thank you. Again, I like to say is please be an ear. Please listen. Um, please call. You know, we have these things called phones, but they're computers. And my challenge to anyone listening or watching this, even post COVID, is to reach out and phone. Phone friends. I phone people just to say hello. Maybe I haven't spoken to them as often as I should. I do this throughout the year. Some people get a little freaked out by it, like, because, why are you calling? Just come say hello. And I think that this was an important thing to do. So all I say is, we feel you have a small part you can make, no matter where you are in this community, what you're doing. You don't need a newsletter. You have a phone. You know at least 50 to 100 people. Make an effort and reach out or be that listening ear. There's so many ways you can help. So, there's definitely a lot of government programs available to take advantage of. But I think as us as being part of the community here, wherever you are in the world, you have a chance that you can talk and listen. So I just leave it with that. And again, thanks to Sham for this great conversation and how to bring light to this these challenging times.
I just want to say something, because you say sometimes you call people just to say hello. I would love to tell people that sometimes the word hello is a hello call, or a word hello from someone you didn't talk for a while, and you realize that they remember you, is what they need. Sometimes it might be the separating line between them committing suicide or deciding to, like, you know what, life is still good. There are people who still care. I'm gonna continue. I'm gonna try again into this life. Sometimes it is, and I know cases like that. So yes, that hello might be, without you knowing, might be the phone call that saved somebody's life from going into suicide. So communication. I can't stress that enough. And I think that this is the time we should say thank you for our audience, and thank you for listening to us and listening to everybody else around you. We hope to see you next time, and we're going to continue talking about topics like that. And as you know us from the episodes before, this is a platform that we need to show issues like that, and we need to engage you into topics like this. So bye.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for listening
Thanks for listening
to the Quantity Leaping podcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much.